Of the Harwich Community Preservation Committee. It's being held, it's our regular meeting. It's being held in the Don B. Griffin Room, Harwich Town Hall, 732 Main Street, Harwich, Mass. At 6 p.m. We're a little late at 6:05. Thursday, February 13th, 2025. Okay, here, welcome guests. We're going to take any public comment first. Sir, when you get to the podium, will you please identify yourself?
Sure. John Chory, Gorham Road. I will be quick because I know this really isn't a discussion period of your board, but I'll be very quick on the questions that I have. I attended a CPC board meeting, I think it was in November, where certain were presenting their projects. One of the projects that I'm interested in is the tech school request for almost $1 million. And I attended that meeting with Leo and Bob Sanford. And a number of questions were raised by this board. The two biggest questions I have to ask is what is the total cost of the project? Not just the project that was talked about that night, but the total project, the building, the operational costs for that building, what is the total cost on that building? Second question I had in the board, was presented, board members asked that question, was how many of the 12 towns that are members of the tech school have participated in this program also to this date or ongoing? And I was just wondering if those questions have been answered, and you don't have to answer them now, you can do it when we get to that request. The reason I ask this is because the town is facing a lot of costs right now, big costs. Everybody in this board had got their property tax statement in January, and I'm thinking we're all probably surprised by the increase that was in that tax form. A big driver of that tax form, which hasn't hit yet, is debt. And some of the debt is starting to hit, and that was a big contributor, I think, in some of the tax increases. So we're asking now, or certain members are asking, for $1 million almost, for a project that doesn't have any defined costs yet on the cost of the project, doesn't have any defined information on the operational of that building costs or the capital associated with that project. The tech school right now, based on assessment of students attending that school for Harwich, is about 11.5%. That's what the cost of Harwich pays. We base it on enrollment. There's an enrollment at that school of 72 kids. One of the questions that was raised, or statement made by this Bob Sanford and Mr. Kukunis, was 100 students are projected to be a part of this school, new program. So if you just use rough numbers, and things change over the years, but 11%, Harwich's cost, if we didn't contribute any of that money for new students, 11 new students would be $308,000 added to the school budgets. We all are following what's happening in Chatham right now with the middle school. There's no cost been associated with that building yet, but that's roughly, they're saying somewhere between $6 and $10, $12 million, of which Harwich will be on the hook of right now for 76% of that cost. And so while I'm, let's see, that's it. I just got cataract surgery. I have to wear these glasses now. But anyway, so I'll wrap it up by saying I'm in favor of the program. I don't want to be construed that I'm against the program that Mr. Sanford proposed and Leo proposed. I think it's a great resource, a great project, a great undertaking. What I am concerned about is the costs and how we can, CPC, award $1 million contract for a project that doesn't have any, maybe you have the information. I couldn't find any information yet on it, based on costs, operational costs, capital costs, and scheduling of the whole thing. It's going to be a remote campus. You're going to have buses going back and forth. That's additional costs. So that's my only concern. I would not be in favor of voting this money right now or a town meeting, when we get to town meeting, if it's approved by your board, for this project, and I will get up at town meeting and state those reasons why. If it passes, so be it. But to commit $1 million for a project that's not even fully vetted yet, I can't see that. personally. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next.
Hey everybody, Eric Beebe, Recreation Director. I just wanted to take this public comment opportunity to answer some questions and provide some information on the Veterans Memorial Shade Structure Project that I had presented to you guys. There were some questions. Just to recap, it's a request for a shade structure with sails and poles behind the community center at the Veterans Memorial Field Complex. It would be used for our camps, after-school programs, any bookings. It's primarily to shade from the sun, to get the kids out of the sun, and to give a kind of area for people to book for picnics or whatever kind of event they want to have. The main quote was obtained through O'Brien and Sons Incorporated. They are based out of Medway, very reputable company. They specialize in shade structures, pavilions, playground equipment. We've used them many times in the past, so we do rely on their quotes and estimates. We did contact some other municipalities that have these types of shade structures with the sails, including one in Colorado where the weather's much worse than ours. They rave about it. They say they're very simple to put up and take down in the off months. If they're stored in a dry area, they don't see any deterioration, rot, anything like that, as long as it's stored in a dry area, which we can definitely provide for the sails in this case. One of the things that came up from the committee was the option of a concrete pad instead of just natural grass underneath. We did get several quotes and estimates for concrete pads that range from $60,000 to $100,000 for the pad alone. It would be a 40 by 40 pad that would be 4 to 5 inches thick. So that, we think that's kind of cost prohibitive, considering that would double the cost of the project. We did look into some other options. AstroTurf was an option we looked into, which is much, much cheaper. We're still delving into that to see if it's an option for underneath the sails. But that's something that we could always add later for minimal cost on our end. You also inquired whether the Harwich Highway Department would be able to help out with the installation to cut costs on the project. I did speak to representatives from the Highway Department and Parks Department. They said that they would not be able to handle the installation of this project. Furthermore, it may void some of the warranties on the equipment that would be installed. So basically, just to kind of recap, the reason that we're going for this type of structure as opposed to like a pavilion, number one is cost. We're trying to keep the cost down. We looked into pavilions. We have quotes that are a year or two old for a pavilion of that size and what we would be looking for, of anywhere from $320,000 to $350,000 before the concrete pad. So this is about 1/3 that price. We think that it is getting more and more popular as a shade structure. It suits the purpose that we're looking for. We think it's cost effective compared to a pavilion. And we think it's a good project for the town, for our programs, for bookings, for some revenue being produced. And hopefully I answered most of your questions on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else care to speak in public session?
Will we ask you for discussion when we come up on the agenda?
No. You know how we work.
Well, I wasn't absolutely sure, otherwise I'm in the past.
You have the floor, sir. Would you
Thank
please
you.
identify yourself?
Larry Ballantyne, I chair of the Affordable House Trust, and we have asking for $500,000 for the Affordable Housing Trust. We've done that through the years, and we're asking for $250,000 for rental assistance. Let me speak first to the Housing Trust. Just remind you that we've had pretty good success moving forward. We're about the old fire station apartments are nearly completed. They hope to be occupied this summer. 5 Bells Neck, the same way. And we had a meeting last night in which we gave initial approval. You've probably read in the paper, project of John Kerry.
Carey.
His last name.
Carey.
It's hard to get old. John Kerry is presented to us on Route 28, which is, we have 40 apartments in total. 10 of those would be affordable. And so we're pleased with that because they all, the prices aren't that much different. They range from about $160,000 to $190,000 per unit over the 3 projects. But that will mean that we'll have, if that we've approved $500,000 last night to start, and they have some questions to answer. But over 2 or 3 year phases, the total would amount to $1.8 million, which is $180,000 per apartment. It's still a pretty good price per affordable unit. So I'm hoping you'll keep our coffers, money in our coffers to pay for these projects going forward on the Housing Trust. The rental assistance, the latest information I have on that is that we have 3 people getting help right at the moment at approximately $500 per month. We have 3 that are nearly complete, so we have a 6 total. And it's, in addition to the rent, we pay for case study management and administration. So we're probably at this point around $50,000 to $60,000 committed. Based on that, I'm hoping that we keep the rental assistance, but lower it from the $250 I asked to $150 to replenish the money that we funded from the trust before. Because I know you're tight on money, so maybe we can reduce that sum and keep that money for rental assistance and keep our affordable trust program going. So that's my pitch.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody else like to speak in open comment? Please identify yourself, sir.
Good evening. Michael Locke, Executive Director of the Harwich Conservation Trust. We've fully spent your prior authorization that you recommended town meeting approved in 2021 and 2022 for the wheelchair accessible trail construction at the Robert F. Smith Colebrook Preserve, ecological restoration, which was a partnership between Harwich Conservation Trust, the town of Harwich, the state's Division of Ecological Restoration, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We wanted to thank you for your support of that trail creation and a very scenic 100-foot boardwalk. That's one of 4 now that offer views of Colebrook, which now runs free for the first time in over a century. The trails are open dawn to dusk, and we invite you to come see them. We know some of you are going to attend a tour with our board president, who's here, Tom Evans, sometime this month. So again, thank you for your support. Later on in your agenda, you also have a 50-acre Cape Cod Rail Trail land preservation project under consideration. And that's a significant potential partnership between the trust and the town. The new information, besides what you have in your application, is that we have been approved for a $500,000 challenge grant from an anonymous foundation. So the amount before you in the application for $500,000 could leverage that challenge gift. So essentially expanding the impact, the benefit of a recommendation to town meeting for voter consideration. So thank you for the time.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, hearing none, moving on. Approval of the minutes, CPC minutes, December 12th and January 9th. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the CPC minutes, meeting minutes from December 12th, 2024, and January 9th, 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next, new business. Discussion, update, CPC financials with Ms. Davis. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay? I was in front of you, I don't know, probably a couple months ago, was it a month ago? A couple months ago now? Talking about the project that we were gonna do to walk through, basically verifying that the information that you're using from the town's ledgers for your community preservation fund is accurate. That we all agreed, last time I was here, on the 2019 balances, what you had for reservations and what you had for undesignated. We agreed agreed that that was our starting point. We would then go from 2019 through 2024, tracing from what gets voted at town meeting, right? What you do, everything has to be voted, the projects, going from the town meeting votes to what was reserved in the ledgers and the reports that you're using, and tying those into the CP2 reports that are filed with the state, and identifying any differences. So I will say, we've done that. We've gone through the votes, the CP2s, and all the ledgers. We've come up with an analysis. I will say I'm not done, but almost done. I wanted to meet with you tonight to tell you where we're at, and there's a few options on how we wrap this up and where we go from there. So I gave you a couple of things in front of you that we'll talk about to make sure that you understand what we're gonna do and that you're all in agreement with it. So I will say, I'll start with it was a very brief, it's the smallest PowerPoint you're ever gonna see, but very, very brief PowerPoint just to kind of keep me on track a little bit and to remind you, so in the town's general ledger, your community preservation funds are in Fund 8027. No one here really cares about 8027, but that's the fund they account for them in. And within your fund balance, if you will, within the buckets, there's an account called Reserve for Encumbrances. That's the first one. What we expect to see in Reserve for Encumbrances is any projects that you have voted that are still going on. The money hasn't been spent yet, you haven't closed them, you're still reserving that money. It could come from any of the buckets, or it could come from undesignated. But what we're doing is sort of tracing those encumbrances to make sure what's being reported on the ledger ties back to your votes. There's also, at the end of the year, a reserve for expenditure. It's a key to note. The reserve for expenditure is what you voted at town meeting in May, whenever your town meeting is in the spring, around May. You voted it in May, but it's gonna be spent out of next year. So you haven't set up those encumbrances, those projects quite yet, but at the end of the year, they shouldn't show as undesignated, so we put them in a reserve for expenditure. Then the next year, they get moved down and set up so that you can start spending them. There is an open space reserve, historic resources reserve, I always call it historic preservation, and community housing. Those three, what I keep referring to as the buckets. Every year, you are supposed to transfer in, at town meeting, you don't know yet what your revenue is gonna be, so you do an estimate. You take whatever you're budgeting for revenue for your community preservation fund, and you reserve 10% of that in each of those three. So we expect those buckets to increase by that estimate. At the end of the year, or at your next town meeting, what you are required to do is say, what did we really collect? And if there is more than a de minimis difference between what you budgeted and what you actually took in, you should be truing up those reserves. I wasn't sure about that last time. I actually went back to the Division of Local Services. I have a Q&A from them and directives from them saying as long as if it is more than de minimis, it should be moved up. So I will say, the punchline, that hasn't been happening. That's happened in 20, hasn't happened since then. So we know overall there's no money missing, but the buckets are unaligned because of that. And so the buckets, when you're voting a project, I know you have projects to vote tonight, if you're voting a project and you're voting it, if it can come out of one of those buckets, you want to use the buckets first, right? That is the most restrictive money that you have. So if you're voting a project, you want to make sure it can come from one of those, and we all know that undesignated is used, there's other things that you can do. Undesignated can be for any of those three things, plus recreation and some other things that you can do with that. So the reserves, the buckets, they get increased every year by your receipts. They get decreased by what you voted for projects to come out of them. And then they could go up again if you rescinded any of those projects. If you don't spend all of the money in any one of those encumbrances, you can move it back, but it's gotta go to the bucket it came out of, right? So a big part of what we were doing is making sure the buckets are correct, that the information that you're getting off the ledger is accurate. And then you have undesignated fund balance. Undesignated fund balance is what's left for everything else, and all of your revenues, all of your expenditures close to undesignated fund balance. So when they close the books, any overall expenditures that you had close to that, unless they're, I should say, They close to that, but they get charged to a certain encumbrance. You can't spend money unless you had something voted for it. And so they get closed out to an encumbrance, everything gets, the rest of it, everything is hit to fund balance. So what you have for unrestricted is important, and I know what you have to vote tonight, a lot of it comes, I just looked at it quickly, a lot of it comes from unreserved. So we went through, we agreed with 2019. In 2020, we didn't, I'm gonna go to the colorful sheet, the small numbers. I will say, this is a very shortened version, I will share with you eventually the whole spreadsheet. In between each of these columns is all of the activity. 2019, we agreed on those balance. The end of 2020, in 2020, the actual revenues were 10% went to each of those reserves. So there was no problem or no true-up required. They put the actual numbers in as reservations. We ended up still with all of these encumbrances, and you'll see the encumbrances come down to like $1.7 million. The only problem that they had at the end of 2020 is that they didn't book the reserve for expenditure. So the reserve for expenditure at the end of 2020 would have been what you were gonna spend the next year. Being halfway through 25, it doesn't matter, right? They did encumber it the next year, so it eventually caught up. If you're looking at this column, they just didn't book the reserve for expenditures. At the end of the year, it was in undesignated. But the next year, they booked the correct encumbrances, so your undesignated was right. So it ended up being fine at the end of the day. You're okay. So 2020, no problem. Our issues, and it ties, at this schedule that we have, the top of this ties to what's in your general ledger for each of those reserves for that year. We do, at the last page, you're gonna see a lot of colors, is where we're coming up with what the variances would be in every year. The problems for us, the biggest year that things started going wrong are 2021. Part of the issue with 2021, I'm not sure what happened, but when they were recording things to the general ledger, they booked one number. So when they were recording a fix of your reserve for open space, reserve for historic preservation, they booked one number, and we don't know what makes that up. That's part of what's open, because I want to see if there's any way we can go back to try to figure that out. What we can do, if we can't figure out what somebody did back in 2021, is say, what do we know should have happened, and just fix for it. So I want to walk through that with you, because that's probably the most significant thing we have to talk about. In 2021, if they were going to increase, right, we were good with your beginning balances for your reserves in your three buckets. If we were going to increase it by the estimated revenues, that would be about $177,000, $177,600. That was on your recap. That's what you voted for a budget to put into each of those reserves. What we show is that you were projects that were voted coming out of those buckets. You had $20,000 coming from open space. You had $442,000 coming from historic preservation. You had about $168,000 coming from community housing. I'm off. I don't know why they booked these. They decreased historic resources by $450,000. They decreased community housing by $285,000. They actually increased open space by $120,000. I don't know where those come from. So the only other thing that I can think of that would make those balances go down would be other votes. I don't know if any of you have anything other than the town meeting records or anything like that for it. So I'm not sure what they were trying to do. They didn't leave a good trail. We will verify with the town. We haven't given this yet. We're reporting it to you first, but we can go back to people sitting in the town accountant's office now and see if they have any other information on those entries. It was one entry. They didn't do it in steps like they do every other year. Like, here's the reserve and here's us moving everything. That year, it looks like they were trying to catch up. They didn't book anything until June 30th of 21, and the June 30th of 21 was one net number for each of those. So that's the year it started going off in your buckets. Now remember, there's not money missing. It's just that what would have happened, in my opinion, for that year, your buckets were off, were understated. which means you're undesignated, is overstated. In total, you're okay, but if you were voting to use everything from recreation or something that you couldn't use from the buckets, then you run into a problem. So that's sort of the biggest year that we run into an issue. In the subsequent years, let me go to my working copy. That was 21. Then in 22, we can tie perfectly to what they booked 22, 23, and 24. What they booked for the reserves ties right into your tax recap. What they never did was go back into those reserves and book the true-up. What happens is you estimate your revenue low, right? You estimate conservatively for your revenue. So in 22, for example, each bucket should have had $238,000. You actually put in $161,000. So you need a true up to fix 22. Same thing happened. So the variance in each category for 22 is about, 22, sorry, 22, I'll give you that. 22, they didn't actually book the transfer, so erase what I said. 22, we put what they should have done. In 22, I don't think they booked the transfer at all. It should have been, the budget said 161, 171, they didn't book a transfer. In 23 and 24, they booked the estimate. So the big problem here is in 22, nothing going into the buckets. 23, 24, they booked an estimate. Overall, if we look at what they should have done for revenue and what they didn't do for revenue, we're off about $1 million. So that would take $1 million out of your unreserved that you think you have right now and put it into those buckets. Now, so I think you have to do that. I think you need to make a one-time correction to do that. We will verify, I just want to go back and verify the numbers a little bit, but this is what we've come up with and it ties. In total, we're good, but in the buckets, we're not. The problem is it restricts you a lot more on what you can spend your money on. With that said, I think when I came in tonight, you have, let's go to what I gave you so I can show you this. So the first one, we'll go with the color, the pretty colored sheet. This goes from 2019 all the way to 2024. This top part of it is not what is in your ledger. It walks through the reservations, and then it has the bottom piece is your encumbrances, and there's one line for the reserve for expenditure. So you'll see that sort of pink line that goes around. That's what you voted at town meeting. So let's just say, for example, June 30th, 2024, that $1,840,000 that you see in pink is what was reserved for expenditures. The problem that we have in the ledgers we were using, we didn't show a reserve for expenditures, that they didn't actually reserve that. So again, if it's not reserved, it might be in your undesignated. If it's in your undesignated, you are making decisions based on that information. So the $1,840,000, you'll understand this, you're gonna see a piece of paper. One of them is gonna have the $1,840,000. There you go. This is one of your handouts. It's gonna total $1,040,000.
Make it 840,200.
Yep, that's it. That's it. So you need to make sure that, when I plugged in, we talked about what you think you have for for balance as of June 30th, 24, is not double dipping on those numbers, that those numbers have been reserved as of June 30th, 2024. In what we got for ledgers, it wasn't. If they've closed the books and everything is said and done for 24, we need to make sure that they reserve that. Do you have a question?
I do. When I'm looking at your colored sheets.
Yep.
And the buckets that you have for ending balances of 6/30/2024, are those certified are those what you have for certified balances? Or are those what we should have for certified balances? Or is there still additional money that we need to put in?
So I will say that I did a sheet, this, when you say certified,
I mean, what was,
right, we haven't certified anything. I do have a piece of paper that you're gonna see that is just like what I gave you for 2019, last time we met, but it's for 2024. This does not tie to the ledger. This is not what's in the ledger. This is what
That's
we
what I was afraid
think
of.
they should be. And the only thing I have highlighted is a negative $50,000, because somehow it looked like some admin got released twice, so we're gonna have to follow up on that. But you'll see, this only has undesignated of $1.8 million. If we then go fix your buckets, right, we just have to make sure that there's enough money left in your undesignated before you start spending all of that.
so I guess where my concern comes in is, when we're looking at numbers, you know, David had got some numbers from the treasurer's office, which is what we were kind of using to base our potential votes for this evening on. And of course, that, looking at it, our undesignated was at about 4.8, which seemed very high, which makes sense now with what you're saying, if we're 1.8 short
Yep.
in buckets. So all of that being said, the numbers that, when I say certified balances, I mean the balances that were certified as a part of the tax rate setting and closing the books for
So,
FY
no,
'24.
That would be what's on your recap, that's what's on
Right.
your CP2, that's gonna tie to the ledger almost all the time. There are a few years, it didn't tie to the ledger. In most cases, they take those numbers, like that's the source, is the town's ledger. So if something wasn't, if the reserves weren't put in the right buckets in the ledger, that's where that information comes from. I will say the bottom of the colorful sheet does show what those variances are, but when you talk certified, I'm gonna say that's what the issue is. I mean, I think that's why we're here, that's why we were doing this.
So when I see certified, the way we worked since I've been here, when Carol was here, Carol would give us what our end of the fiscal year balances were in our buckets and our undesignated. And then she would give us an estimate on what she thought our revenues would be for the following year. And we would base our 10% buckets off of those estimates.
Yep.
And we would typically, as you said, vote against our buckets first and our certified balances first. And then at some point, we got brought into this realm of voting out of our anticipated revenues for any number of reasons that happened back in 2018. So we kind of made the flip-flop at that point, and I think that's when we started to go off the rails a little bit with the numbers not always matching up where they are. I guess when my-
Hold
Yeah.
that thought for 1 minute. Are we gonna continue? Is the state is DOR saying to us, we have to continue using estimated, not certified?
That's what they recommend. So I'll quote them. This actually comes from the Community Preservation Coalition. I think I have the Mass General Law here, or the Division of Local Services, what they're saying on it. The question on this is, if our community preservation, our community's actual CPA revenues end up being much higher than our estimates, and one of the project categories did not have the required 10% expended or reserved, do you need to transfer those accounts at year end? The Department of Revenue says if at the end of any year, the amount of the 10% minimum that was underestimated is more than de minimis, the community, just say you assumed a 50% state match and you got 100% state match, they give you an example. The CPC should recommend an appropriation to the reserves from fund balance needed to satisfy the requirement. The requirement is 10% of revenue.
Right.
So it's not 10% of estimates. The reason they recommend doing 10% of estimates and then doing a true-up is because if you don't do that, then you don't have anything to spend, you don't have anything, unless you're gonna go a year behind and you're really not gonna spend that money for a whole nother year. If you wanna do it that way and you have enough in your CPA fund to not spend this year's money, you can wait till you know what the real money is, and then at town meeting, allocate 10% of the real money. If you want to spend it in the year, during the year that you're collecting, you budget based on your best estimate, your estimated revenue on the recap, put in the 10% like you've been doing, but then you've got to have a town meeting article the next year to true it up. We put in this amount because that was based on our estimate, our actual came in over. It always comes in over because you budget conservatively, and then put the amount in. And I mean, there's this de minimis thing, to me, it's over $1 million, it's clearly more.
Right, it's not, right. Doesn't meet that definition.
It doesn't meet that
Do
definition.
you, do you know what our buckets should be at this point, or are you still figuring out those numbers?
I know what the buckets, I do know what the buckets should be. Yes, you have a piece of paper. There's a piece of paper for that. I'm sorry about the paper.
No?
I probably should have done it on the screen.
So I'm looking at the one that says your budget analysis,
Yeah, so.
account budget analysis,
Yep.
and it has
So
buckets
there's
at the
one,
top.
it's gonna look like
Yeah.
this.
Yep.
You'll see, it says the first column, 2020, the transfer was based on actual,
Yep.
so there's no issue there. 2021, it was, so here's the problem with 2021. That's why this isn't really final. Here's my problem with 2021. I have in here, what was your budget? I don't really know what they transferred in, because there's one number that hits that account, and I can't tell what part of it is what. I can't.
But we should know what our
Yep.
actual revenue receipts were and
Yep.
what that, okay.
So we do. So based on this, so that's based on what we think they transferred in, but we have to fix that account anyway. The, if you look down below, this is your actual revenue is the 2,082,000. That means 10% is $208,000. Should have gone into each category instead of the
Okay.
177. The variance is 30,000 in each category. Total variance of all three categories is 92. So we did that in the next year. You'll see that my comments on the top, there were no transfers in made for '22. So the actuals that should have gone in were 238,000. Your revenue is 2,387,088. 10% would have been the 238. You actually didn't transfer anything. That would have been a total that year of 700,000. And then same thing for '23 and '24, they transferred in the budget, so the variances in those years were
Okay.
30,000, 46,000.
So that gives us $1,051,000 that we need to come up with to put in.
Yeah, and just,
And
when
is the-
they come up with, it's taking it out of its undesignated and putting it into those buckets. And that's why, the only other caveat here, have you been over time ever appropriating money under undesignated that could have gone to one of the buckets?
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's what we use as our overflow. When we run out of, we come from the bucket first, and then we take from
Which
the,
is exactly what you should do.
right, so,
If we're gonna fix this, and you need to fix your undesignated, are there, and I would say you don't wanna go back to every vote you've made in the past 5 years, but are there any projects that are significant that you may have taken out of undesignated that would have qualified to come out of one of the buckets, because that can fix part of your I don't know that, you would know that.
so there would be, because in historic, we had money for the Brooks Academy Museum. In open space, the only question I'd have with open space is the land grant getting refunded back. I don't know that there'd be enough with open space. With community housing, we're spending that because we've traditionally put money into the trust. That being said, your recommendation is to take it, to fix the problem, either do that or just take from undesignated funds
You can take from undesignated and move it up to.
as opposed to designating an additional 1.051 from anticipated revenue and take the hit in the next fiscal year.
So you mean fix it based on your budget going forward?
Yes, fix it with, so instead of voting, we were estimating, say, 1.8 in receipts this year, estimating putting 180,000 in each bucket on anticipated revenues, do we do the 180 and then do another,
And take the hit.
do another million, take the hit in our,
26,
yeah.
you'd be taking it in 26. I think.
I don't know, I'm asking, just
Well,
asking the
I
question.
think as long as you're gonna get there at the end of the day,
Yeah.
I mean, that's taking a problem that started in 21 and now moving it to 26, and here you are voting projects.
Right,
You know, we don't, the point in the CPC is to keep projects going. Like, no one's trying to keep you from operating. You have the money, but you have to eventually get there with your buckets. You're gonna get to the right place. If that's a less painful way to do it and you've documented it, you're probably fine. Or going back, so right, the other thing to do, if you can identify, so, okay, we're gonna make a clean sweep, we're gonna take money out of undesignated, we're gonna move it into the buckets to correct for these particular years and to kind of have support for that. And then we're going to reclassify 5 projects that were previously voted to come from undesignated and taken from a designation. That might get your undesignated back up to what you need it to be. It's gonna help, because if you knew back in 22 that you had all this money reserved, you would not have voted to take some of that money out of undesignated. It's just a project. Who knows? I don't know. The money that I could give you a list of everything you voted from undesignated. We have that right on the spreadsheet. So we have those every year right on the spreadsheet. Then it would be a matter of, and you probably want to do it at town meeting to say, we want to reclassify.
Right.
We originally voted for them to come out of undesignated. We would like to change that designation, to change it to come out of open space, historic preservation.
Yeah, that was my question.
Really have to allocate it to open space, and then,
Yep.
and then reclassify it.
Yep.
Reclassify the vote that we voted that was, say,
Yeah, when you say fix the problem, what does that mean exactly? Does that refer to the auditor's recommendations and you move stuff around? Or do we have to bring everything to town meeting to change, to straighten this out?
The things that didn't get transferred that were supposed to, that already went to town meeting, you can just make the journal entry. It is your ledger is correct. You were supposed to transfer this, that's what was voted, it just didn't get fixed. That's a journal entry, you don't need to go to town meeting. If you are going to reallocate, so if you're gonna, town meeting only voted to transfer the estimate. They say that you should have a motion at town meeting to go, I'm gonna see what it says. Should recommend appropriations to the reserves from fund balance and the amounts necessary to meet the requirement. So as far as going from, you reserved an estimate at last year's town meeting, now you wanna fix that to make it be actuals, you have to go to town meeting to do that. So part of it can be done because it's a correction of an error, it just didn't happen on the ledger. And part of it, you would go to town meeting to say, we have not transferred the actual amounts to the reserves for the past X number of years. You have to get a vote to transfer from undesignated into those 3 reserves to correct that. That would go to town meeting. The other part that you'd have to go to town meeting is if you've already voted 5 different projects and you want to change the classification. We voted to take them from undesignated, now we would like to take them from designated to change those classifications, because that will help you to make this process less painful. Does that make sense?
I'm not quite sure about that last part. I understand it up till then.
Okay, so let me, and I'm trying to make it, I know, it's a lot of numbers going around.
Well, the other thing I'm thinking about is bringing this on town meeting floor
Oh,
and
my.
making it understandable for the town voters, okay? Because this is just gonna,
Yep.
you know.
So,
and I think that was my reason for saying, could we just do it
can we
from,
do it going forward?
can we do it going forward? Just know that we're allocating a significant portion of our revenue for our anticipated FY '26 revenue into buckets to make up for the balances that haven't gone into those buckets in the last 4 to 5 years.
You are gonna get to the same place,
And that-
basically at the same time.
I just think it's, personally, I think
It's an easier
it feels
way
like
to
it's
get there.
it's an easier way to get there, and it's an easier way
Please,
to
an
explain it
easy
to town
lift
meeting.
is what you want to do with town meeting.
But I guess the thing is if if we were gonna allocate 10% to each bucket this coming year, this voting time, you know, why not put more in to make up
To
for
make
it?
up for the past.
And but that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah, but you're saying 2026, which is confusing me.
Well, because if you're voting at.
because that's what we're voting in town
That's
meeting.
where-
Town meeting is voting
Okay,
for
right.
all right.
26.
Right.
So you're, but
that-
you are saying, let's take care of it now.
Yes, I'm saying instead of, so Kathy.
Yes, that's, okay, that's what I want to understand.
FY '26, if we were estimating 1.8 million in receipts and we said 180 in each bucket.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm saying, whatever she tells us our 10% is, what a,
I'm with you.
should be, plus,
you.
plus everything that we missed. The 238 and 20, the 238, almost 239,000 in 2022, the 244,000, whatever the difference was there in 2023, FY
So
'23.
that, and that's fine, and I can sort of break that out for you, this is what you need to put in to do the makeup. Because they probably already have what was estimated, like you probably already have your recap, right, of what you anticipated for your revenue for next year, do we have that yet? Probably.
I don't know that we've actually gotten that.
Well,
Well, we've got something here.
Yeah.
Where did this come from?
I'm not comfortable with making anything on that sheet public now at this point.
Well, these are the 26.
It's this
I
one.
mean, it makes sense why numbers looked larger than what we thought, right? Because
they were, right?
they were inflated because transfers just didn't happen. But to your point, if the money's there, the money's there. It's just a matter of,
It's moving it, and the only real problem is, are you now spending money that you don't have?
Right.
Now, eventually, you will get that, right? Money's gonna come into undesignated. So, but you know, if you think you have $5 million and you only have $1 million, you know, how much time is it gonna take to dig yourself out of this hole? That's why I just say, if there's anything of significance that goes into a different bucket, you know, over time, the whole point of this is to make sure that, you know, when the community voted this, that at least a certain amount gets spent on these categories. The rest of it is based on your unique community and your needs, and every community is different. So we wanna make sure, over the course of time, that you have actually spent money in the right categories.
so I'm looking at you pretty.
Yep.
You're pretty colorful one, right? And I look at the undesignated fund balance for CPC as of 6/30/2024. You have as 1.864. Is that the number from which I'd be taking 1.051? Yes. So that's pretty much, so I'm just saying
Could you repeat what you just said, Mary?
so if you look in the far right-hand column of the pink sheet, right? It has the purple number, it says undesignated fund balance, CPC, undesignated, and it goes across. The last number is $1,864,488.07. That is the balance from which we would need to take the $1,051,000 out of to true up the buckets. Which would leave us with, what, about $700,000
In undesignated,
in undesignated.
but we would have more money.
Overall, you still have the
We all have
same-
the same money.
Still the same money.
Still have the same money.
Correct, but,
$6.7 million in this
Correct,
fund at
but-
the end of '24. No matter how you slice it, it's what buckets it's in. And we just think that over time, that has, we haven't had enough put into it.
This is exactly what we thought.
right, so, and I guess here's my comment on it is just taking historic preservation reserve. Renee's numbers have the historic preservation based on these numbers, has an ending balance of 571, 320.24, to which we need to add an additional the difference between 210 and 244, the difference between 198 and 240, almost 245, the difference between 238 and 161. So we've got to add another $500,000
It's about 350 to each.
Is it about, okay, so.
Each.
So if you're adding 350 to 571, then our historic bucket becomes almost $800,000, $900,000? And we've got, you know,
Okay.
we have
excuse me.
$37,000 to spend this year. So I'm just saying, it is taking it away from our undesignated balance and will impact what we're spending, what we could spend on recreation. That's all, my only point.
To clarify what you're saying, she has numbers here, starting with 356, 679, 20
Yep,
for community housing, and you're saying that one should add $350,000 to each of those three buckets because that's an estimate of what got inappropriately classified as undesignated.
that's
And
what we were short in transferring. Plus, we have to also add to that an additional estimate for this year, correct?
I haven't looked at 25, I only
So,
looked at 24.
right.
So are those numbers you're recommending that we use tonight? Because tonight, hopefully, we can make some determinations about allocating funds here, and we can't do that if every bucket is off by hundreds of thousands of dollars. So are you suggesting that we should take these numbers in the three buckets, add $350,000 to each of them, and use those in order to determine what we're spending and which buckets it's coming out of?
So the only reason I say no, and I think I started this with, I have some questions for you. We've gone through all the votes, we're almost there, but I have a few things that I feel like should get straightened up with this, and I wanted before we finalize this and say yes. Now, honestly, coming in here, I didn't have these, I didn't know what you were voting tonight. All I was working on is the project itself. I can get it to you in fairly short time. What I want to make sure is there's two issues that I want to verify. One is the year that they just plugged a number, and it's actually decreasing your reserves by a significant amount. I can see no justification. I want to make sure that the accounting office doesn't have some support for that I don't have access to. So we're doing it based on your ledger. I have the ledger here, it was one number, and it took down your reserves in that first year, 21 and 21. So I want to verify that. I'd like to just make sure I'm clear on that. The other thing, the year that we didn't see any reserves go in, I want to verify that with the accounting office to make sure that they agree with us that they don't see something we didn't. So I have two things there that I want to make sure that we're clear on. The other thing is, I told you, the ledger that we had, that we went through for 2020, for 2024, didn't have anything in the reserve for expenditures. We're showing you here, you had $1.8 million that was reserved for expenditures. I gave it to you on the printout, that's what we see that should be there. So I want to make sure that they actually book that. Before they gave you your undesignated number, have they taken out what you've already voted at town meeting to use in fiscal year 25?
One last silly question. Your 6/30/2024 numbers don't take into account the estimates that we put in for FY '25.
No.
And then we would, so we would add to those the estimates from 2025.
Yep.
We would then add to those the estimates that we're gonna have to vote for the FY '26, which would be at this town meeting coming up.
Yep.
Right, to go into your buckets, plus the 1.05.
This also, so yes, but this doesn't include any revenue from 25, right? This ends in
Yeah.
24. So, yes, it doesn't include your estimates to go into your buckets. It also
Doesn't include our actuals.
Your actual. So your undesignated does go up by whatever you collected in
Right.
25, take away your 310% amount. So
Right.
you can take,
So this is where I had questions with the numbers that I looked at yesterday, because I couldn't tell whether they included 25 revenues or not. So that's kind of where I was
and you
concerned.
can appropriate money now, tonight, from your 25 money. So this, if we do this, right, it leaves you something in your undesignated. If we clean this whole thing up, let's assume that everything here is, nothing changes. You clean this up, you can still appropriate money tonight from what you would be, you can appropriate from the estimate, what would have come, or, vote to use money from the estimates, what would have, you estimated to come in 25. Just make sure that you are not just taking away from that your estimated, well, yeah, from your estimate, you don't have real numbers, you'd be,
Right, so,
take the 10% away.
so we were always told that we had to either spend, so in '24, when we are voting, we either have to vote estimated fiscal '25 or certified balances from '23, because we have to leave '24 alone, because it's not certified yet, it's in play. You're in the fiscal year.
But while you're in the fiscal year,
Yeah.
you're approving projects based on those estimates. Like you're not, you can still operate based on those estimates. It gets certified at the end of the fiscal.
Okay. Okay,
So
that makes sense.
that gives you some flexibility. So you have a few options.
Yeah.
One is, yes, we fix this going forward. So we make the corrections, we fix this as of June 30th, 2024. But what you're voting now is gonna go to town meeting, right, in May. Would go to town meeting in May, and that's based on next year's project. So you're you're spending money that came in '25, even though you have all this
Right.
money.
So our articles are probably due in the next week or two?
No, we can extend that.
Okay.
We're gonna extend that.
Because I think we have a lot of math to do to get us to a point where we're comfortable to make our votes.
And the other thing I did not look at, and I didn't think of it until I walked in the door, and the first question was, what happened to our $400,000 grant?
Right.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I don't know the answer to that
Yeah.
yet. I will look into, I was like, right, I heard that, I found the note, didn't look at that, so I need to follow up on that. So I have sort of those three things to follow up on. I wanted you, and then I will share my spreadsheets. Like I said, you have this is sort of the very small version. Included in this,
Yep.
for every year, there's about 10 columns.
Sure.
This was us allocating the projects, this was us, going through the votes is not that different, like you have not that many votes every year,
Right.
like 20 votes or whatever it is to allocate funds.
10, 15.
So that
I mean,
list
this is
that,
basically, that's what you voted every year.
the top of that spreadsheet that I gave you that was kind of our last year's working sheet, had the rescissions that we had gone through. It had the $400,000 land grant. And I think it also had, at some point, we double voted the land bank debt. There was $166,000 that was put in a separate vote in a CPC article that was to vote the land bank debt. And it also showed up in the budget article as land bank debt. So I think that was the other item that we didn't know if it came back into our funds or not.
So your
Because certainly
land-
we didn't spend it twice, but I think it was the last piece of the debt service from the 20 years.
How much did you say it should have been?
It was, I think it was like $166,000 that showed up both in a CPC article and in a budget article, and I want to say that was our last.
It wasn't this past year, it was the year before.
Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago. It was our
2023.
last,
They
23, I
supposedly
think.
corrected it.
we believe it
last
was 23.
So it could have been
Could have
in
been
your
24.
article, because you were taking the money, like, we're paying off this debt, it's gonna come from one of our appropriations, we're voting it. Then they could have it in their omnibus budget and say, this is part of our debt service, but some of it is coming from raise and appropriate, and some of it's coming from the land bank.
So we were
that-
told at some point that finance believed that we had voted it twice. So the question was, do we need to do a correction to make sure that we didn't
Did you pay it twice?
pay it twice? And I don't think we paid it twice.
Probably not.
I think it was just a matter of making sure that 166,000 went back into our reserves, our fund balance, our something, as opposed to it being debited twice when it
Right.
wasn't spent twice.
I'm a little more cynical. Would you look into that, please?
66, we think it was FY FY '23. And then, can we just talk one more time about the $400,000 grant? What we think happened with
We had voted on a,
It's in Munis.
I
But-
forget which project it was,
The
the
400,000?
400,000.
It was for the Copeland's property.
The what, say it again?
Spruce Woods project.
The Spruce Woods
Right.
project.
And a land grant was awarded, an LAND grant, and 400,000 should have gone back into the most restricted account that it came out of the original funding, which would have been open space. We know the grant was received, we just don't know if it was allocated to the open space bucket.
Or to CPC in general.
That's the question.
Right.
It's a grant, so usually in CPC, in your fund 8027, in your general ledger, is usually just CPC money, right? It's your state money and your tax money that comes in here. If you had a grant, usually that grant would go into a different fund. I didn't see it, but let me look, and you think that that's in fiscal year '23 also?
I believe it came in prior.
Came in
to
last year, whatever year that is, I don't, you know,
I had in my notes that we thought.
I'm so confused.
I had in my notes that we thought it came in prior to 6/30/23, but it might have been 24.
So it's either FY.
It showed up in Munis.
Yes.
So that should be, I mean, it should be easy
Did
to
it
track
show up
down,
in
so let me look
Yeah,
at that.
it showed up in
There's a
Munis.
chance, one, that it didn't come into this fund at all, and then we just need to make sure that.
Not if it's
we're
on
working in.
Munis.
So you think the money came in, you think you spent the money,
So what we did is we
Say that.
had recommended the money, but when the land grant came in, it was supposed to refund the way the vote
So,
was taken.
the-
It was, we were giving the money in the case that they didn't get the land grant.
did they get the
But in
money?
the case they got, in the situation where they did receive the land grant, then we would be refunded that $400,000.
Let me just ask again, you said the name of the project, what's the name of the
It was the Spruce Woods project, it was an open space project.
You remember the ATM?
That's all right, we can find it that way. So, because they got the grant could have gone into a different fund, but they should have reimbursed you for the money that you
Right.
appropriated out of open space
Right.
for Spruce Woods. Okay, got it.
So instead of that, encumbrance, it would have gone away.
Okay.
I'm just trying to see. Was-
So left to do on our end is to just verify with the town accountant's office, one, the year that we don't think they transferred anything, because that's a significant amount of that $1 million. We just want to make sure that we're very clear on that. For fiscal '21, the year that we can't break out because it was all booked in one amount, to see if anybody has upstairs, downstairs probably, as support for those journal entries so that we can find out why. Though that entry, again, reduced your reserves by a significant amount of money, and I can't imagine why that would have happened. There wasn't a vote that we could see of where that money was going.
So this Munis
So
report.
those, we'll look into the grant, we'll look into the debt payments.
Yep.
And then,
That's
we'll
right.
clean this up, what I will do then is,
I don't know.
I'm gonna say, email the spreadsheet, I mean, is that, I'll summarize.
So I'm just looking at the Munis
Yep.
revenue. It looks like it's the revenue from the 8027, and it does show a state grant under the CPA revenue department. It is showing the 400,000 coming in year-to-date actual under, I can give you the account numbers.
Do you know what date, what year?
This report, sorry, is dated 11/30/2023. It doesn't, I don't have a date on when it came in. It's showing, I'm sorry, it's showing CPC special funds for FY '24, and it looks like it's a 2024-12, so it looks like it's a year end.
So there's a chance that that money came in, but it didn't go back to open space. It makes the problem bigger.
It shows in the revenue account, I just don't know whether it would show in the expenditure account, is making it into the expense
Did you
account,
just say
sorry.
that compounds the problem?
No, so you'll be making recommendations to us on how we can fix all this.
Because I think I have another one.
And the recommendations have to be, what are corrections that just need to be made in the ledger, because we just
Right,
identified something that did get booked correctly, but we don't really need town meeting. And then what are the things that you would want to do to be able to fix these that you actually should go to town meeting?
Yes.
okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Go to town meeting.
Thank you.
Errors.
Where does it leave us for voting?
Okay.
Can you scan this and
Any
email it to me?
other,
I know what I'd like to say, but there's a microphone in front of me.
and the good news, I know that you're making real-world decisions based on these buckets of money. Again, it's all in one place, the money's there, it's the buckets that are messed up.
Understood.
Overall, you have money, you have revenue coming in, that's the good part of it.
Please.
It's still a good program, it's just that it sort of went, the reconciliation part of it went off bucket-wise.
That's the one we're talking about.
Okay, can I have this?
That month.
All right, thank you so much.
It's the next to last line on the first page.
Yep, got it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to clarify another point here.
You have the floor.
In past years, if we were doing things this year, the way I should say, the way I understood we were doing them in past years, we would use, if we were doing it the same way this year, we would use whatever the final numbers are here for 6/30/2024 balances, and then we would use anticipated revenues from fiscal year '26. What I understand you to be saying, it's not clear to me whether the committee has decided this, but what I understand you to be saying is we really should be using estimated '25 revenues, not anticipated '26 revenues. Is that correct?
Denise, I'm sorry, I think I just want to make sure we're really clear on that. If you're voting tonight to use money from your undesignated fund balance, is that where this is coming from? You can't,
Any of the votes in the past, we have used estimates of the following fiscal year revenues to take money from, including like the previous fiscal years, what has been established as the balance from the previous fiscal year. I hear you saying, don't use anticipated '26 revenues here, use whatever the estimates are of '25 instead. Am I hearing that correctly? Is this something we're agreeing to doing?
so.
Or am I just confused myself about how this is supposed to work?
I'm a little bit confused about that. What you're allowed to do is when you're doing your tax recap, right? You're estimating your receipts and you're estimating what you're gonna spend, right, in any one fiscal year. Now, when you go to vote money, you have balances that you're appropriating from. So right now, you're partway through fiscal year '25. If you're voting money and you have money available in '25, we only went through '24. This project only went through '24. I haven't looked at '25 at all. But if you want to vote money and you didn't have enough in '24, because after we're done adjusting, there's not enough left in your undesignated, but you want to vote a project, then you would be voting from your estimates that you have for FY '25. Did we say that? That makes sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay. Thing is, we're looking at, was
Good thing we're not on the finance committee, is all I'm saying.
25, and you're going to town meeting to vote money that you're gonna spend, that's gonna be available to spend in '26.
That's not what we've been doing,
So,
right?
so just to clarify, council had advised us that we had to either vote certified balances, which were done through the recap, the end of the tax recap sheets, or anticipated revenue for the upcoming fiscal year, so July 1st.
Couldn't touch.
We couldn't touch the fiscal year that we were in, we
In.
couldn't touch. So
Because okay, so let me just, so you're not spending 25, you're either spending what was already certified for
Correct.
24, which we're gonna mess with, right? So we're
Right.
sort of gonna mess with that now,
Right.
because we're gonna make some reallocations.
Right.
Or you're doing it based on your estimated for
for
26.
'26, Because everything we're voting for the budget is for FY '26. So that was how council had advised us to do it, and that's how our motions and our votes were always drafted.
Like, that's
So,
fine.
I think
Can
that's where
do
John,
that.
that's
I
where
would-
John's coming from.
I would
the
go with
question.
the recommendation of council.
Okay.
Based on that. So that's why so last year, so what we do know is your $1.8 million, you voted at the May 24 town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But you weren't, but it's only in reserve for expenditures, because you couldn't spend that.
Until July 1st.
Right.
And in July, it comes out of reserve for expenditures and goes into those individual line items, and then you're spending it. So it does make sense.
So that's how we had started at some
Can't
point,
spend
when we
this
didn't
year.
have enough money.
When I came in, you were saying, we can't spend this year's money, we can only spend the
Right.
old money, or we can spend what we budget for next
Right,
year.
and that's-
The reality is, you did already spend this year's money, you already voted $1.8 million from this
Right.
year's money. You
Right.
just already did it.
Right.
So now you're gonna vote to take from next year's money.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
It was that we had to vote it before the budget started, or,
Contradicts the previous answer.
or after the budget closed.
So, you voted, you already spent the money from this year, so that's your $1.8 million.
Yes.
That's what you were planning on
Yes.
spending from FY '25, so you can't go back and do that again.
Okay.
Does that,
That's great.
okay,
Thank you.
all right. I think I'm confused too. So anyway, I feel like we've come a long way. I think it's what you thought was gonna happen. And we'll, just work to help you clean it up and make some recommendations. And what I think I should do probably, the next time we meet is just make sure that you have the spreadsheet in front of you so you can look at it ahead of time. And that's the goal.
Timeline
Time,
from you.
I need a couple weeks to get it done. So I feel like we need a few weeks to be able to get it done. You told me, though, that you have a deadline of when you need, so I get town meeting, and you have a deadline of when you need to get things.
Yeah, they
on
have to
board.
prepare the warrant. We have to send our recommendations to legal through the whole process, so.
Next week's the end of the month, so I have a lot of things that have to go out next week, so I'm gonna say, probably at least 2 weeks.
Okay, fair
If
enough.
there's something I can work, I know you want it like yesterday, but I can work with you if you're coming up to a deadline and it's gonna impede something, let me know and I'll see what I can do,
Okay,
okay?
So we need to put another meeting on our agenda then.
yeah, absolutely.
So what, so,
Our
we
next
wanna
meeting
look at a
scheduled
date?
is March 13th, work backwards 2 weeks, right?
Yeah,
so 2 weeks from today is the 27th, 3 weeks is March 6th.
Okay.
27?
I think March 6th is probably safer if it's here. She's dealing with month end on the 27th and the month ends on the 28th.
Okay,
So March 6th, is that the goal?
I think if we can go until the 6th.
Anybody have conflicts?
David, can we
No.
go until the 6th?
yes,
Okay. Because that's the driving factor, right?
right, well, I'll handle that. Yes, let's go to the 6th.
And if I can get any information to you before then, I will.
Please,
Can I ask you a question?
Kathy.
Yeah, Renee, will you be actually able to give us like a number? Like, you kind of come up with the recommendations of how we need to shift things around to true everything up, okay? Whether that be ledger-wise or town meeting-wise. Will you be able to give us some numbers that say, if you do this, you're gonna have this much in each bucket and this much in undesignated for our voting purposes?
So this would be as of June 30th, 2024. What are you voting based on? So I only went through June 30th of 2024. So I do not know what you have voting going forward. I haven't looked at 25's ledgers at all.
No, we don't do anything in between.
Okay.
This is just for
So
up
yes,
and coming.
it would, as of June 30th, 2024.
Okay. Right?
That works,
Well,
because we know.
does that account for the money that we're getting in?
So, no, but we don't
We
care.
need to know it.
We don't care.
We don't care?
So, so I'm just saying, if,
Jen.
this looks like, it looks like a CP2 or something. If I'm looking at the 356, 679, those numbers you're comfortable with as those should be our starting balances before we correct the shortfalls.
Yes, the only thing, is that the one that has one negative number on it? Is there a negative number on it?
It has a negative 50,000.
The negative 50,000 I have to look at. It
Okay.
was, I know what it was an admin fee that was
Yeah.
twice. I don't know if that was on our end or your end. I
Our
don't know.
last finance director had said that we needed to rescind our administrative fees every year, so I don't know if that was why or what.
You're limited on how much you can spend on, of
Kept
course,
it, yeah.
admin.
Right, like 5%.
Understood.
It can't be more than 5%. But there was something about, that it had to be zeroed out on a fiscal year end basis, was a comment that was made at a prior meeting that none of us were aware of or thought had to happen. So that might be why,
Yeah.
but it might not be, so.
Yeah, it looked like it happened twice, so we'll bear.
Well, accounting had been carrying over admin
Yeah,
funds, but
That's been accounted for.
it's supposed to be zeroed out every year,
What we don't
so,
spend.
yeah.
So that could be what it was.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you for coming and explaining all this. I'm new to the CPC, and hopefully going forward, whoever did that general ledger, it won't happen again.
Yeah, and I think
That's
it's, the concept is pretty easy. And you don't have that many projects, right? So some of them are much more complex. You don't have that much. It's just that it, if it was off in one year, then it kind of snowballs.
It compounds, you're right.
Going forward. And and I didn't even, last time we were here, I'm like, I wasn't sure. I know the law says actual revenue. We did research it. It definitely has to be trued up, and that's a big part of the problem.
Well, I think that we've had different answers on that question as well, so.
The
So it's
Division of Local
nice to know.
Services says it. I didn't make it up.
Whatever DLS says goes, right?
Whatever they say goes, I agree.
All right, so we're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
All right. I don't know where to go from here, based on what everybody has heard. Comments from the board? Mary?
I just don't, I think we are in a holding pattern for 2 weeks. I mean, I attempted to prepare things based on downstairs numbers, which, we thought looked high and did look high, and I think it's important that we fix the bucket numbers. We know she's told us that we had a shortfall, so we have, and even their numbers.
Thank you again.
Renee's numbers, just looking at them, are significantly higher than what we had from the last set. If I'm looking, the 283 should really be 382, the 178 should really be 571, and that's before we increase based on shortfalls. So I think it's prudent to wait as much as I don't want to have another meeting, and as much as I'd like to just have our votes, I don't think it's smart to go forward until we really see what those numbers look like, because if we, and I think we have to decide as a board how we want to do those corrections. If we're looking at $1,051,000 needing to come out of undesignated funds, do we want to look at it on a project basis, like she said we could do, which I think is going to be difficult to explain at town meeting. I think I will have a hard time wrapping my head around half of it. And I'm looking at the numbers every day. I think if we decide to go from our existing undesignated fund balance, if it looks like we have 1.8 and we need to take slightly over $1 million, we're wiping that account out. which is an option. It just means there's not much left for anything coming out of there outside of the buckets. And then if we're talking about taking it from anticipated revenues for next year, you know, most of our revenue is gonna be in a bucket. But that being said, we're gonna have to her point, we're gonna have the 25 revenues corrected and in the account in the right way. So we will still have money to spend next year. It's not, I don't think it doesn't feel like we'll take as big of a hit, in my own opinion, if we do it from anticipated revenues and just clean it up in the one fiscal year going forward. And we can explain it to town meeting that, you know, we're using these to true up shortfalls from our votes from the last 4 prior years, and we can even give them the detail that she's gonna give us, or has given us already. So, I personally would lean going that route, because I just think it's easier. And it's cleaner to explain, but those are my 2 cents worth. I'll let the rest of you debate and go forward, but I think it's just gonna be easier to explain the numbers.
Rob, your thoughts?
I'm just kind of leaning what Mary was just saying. Just do it like she said, and go from there. And it will correct itself over time.
Marcy?
I'm agreeing with Mary. Let's just get it right, get it correct, what had been happening in the past years, and just working, especially with Renee really digging in and the numbers that we need to really look at. I would feel more comfortable with meeting when we said March 6th and looking at actual numbers. Sure, yeah.
All right,
I also agree with Mary. I think it's not classified as a problem, it's an issue. And clean it up as fast as you can. Don't dribble it along. And then you're on a clean slate going forward. That would be my suggestion, you know, like Mary's saying, basically. Take the hit and do it. But I agree with you, Dave. I would stay away from the town meeting. You would lose everyone at the sound of a bucket. We would never get past that.
good point. Emily?
I'm in agreement. I think just from a communication standpoint, I think trying to go back and reclassify projects previously would just get so messy, you'd never be able to do it justice in communicating it, so I'm in agreement.
John?
I'm in agreement.
Kathy?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we don't have the money. I mean, the total fund balance is like, on this sheet here is like 6.6. And if you take out what's encumbered at 1.6, that's 5. Then you take out what we encumbered this last year, which she doesn't have information on.
Well, she does. That's the 1.8.
1.8. That was already taken out?
Nope.
So take that out. That leaves us with 3.2, right? And then that doesn't include 2025 money, right?
Right.
Okay, I mean, this is basic math. Basic.
Maybe the 8 point, the May 24 town meeting articles are up top. But these numbers, if you look at the top, the ending balances are 624 on that sheet where it says.
I don't know
we have
which sheet you're on.
This one.
Which sheet?
Her.
Oh, Lord.
There is the 1.84, that's the reserve for expenditures. But that's what she also wanted to look at, the 50 grand.
Okay. Well, if that's already in there, then that's even more. So,
That's why the numbers don't.
Try to get to where I can say, like, we
This
don't
isn't
quite know yet if
24
if these
votes,
changes
so
will
we didn't
impact
have those
how
lists.
we were anticipating voting
Right.
tonight in the buckets. We'll have to wait to see that, but hopefully it doesn't. And
Right.
then we move forward with clean slate of cleaned up,
it doesn't,
yeah,
the overall
right.
overall, there's money to do what we decide to support this year, yeah.
I'm not comfortable going in that direction whatsoever. It's,
We're not going anywhere. We're
well,
just talking.
all right, I just don't want to get this to a vote,
No,
that's
I
all.
wasn't voting.
Well, you have the floor anyway, I'm
No,
sorry.
no, that's fine. I mean, I was just trying to figure out where we were, that's all. That's it. Go ahead.
I apologize, people, that you're here tonight. You've certainly learned a lot, as we have. And we're gonna have to do this again. Again, I'm not comfortable calling for a vote with the amount of information we have, with the missing pieces that are still there. The one good thing is, there's gonna be a blame game out there. I don't give a damn. We're getting it corrected. And that's what the bottom line is going forward. So, anything from is the time element, the March 6th, can everybody make that?
No, I can't, I'm already booked out of town.
Okay,
I hope I can be here.
okay. All right, so we're gonna stick at March 6th. Any other questions from any board member? All right, can we get into, is there anything else so that we can? Oh, all right, let's go to old business. Social media.
No numbers, I promise.
Thank you.
I put together a little strategy, we don't have to go through it like it's super depth today, but I can walk you through, and I just wanna have a quick conversation with Mary here about the social handles. So when this comes down to, I just outlined, just so we have it, kind of what we're trying to accomplish with social, so that we can all be on the same page, in terms of, okay, we're looking to establish a consistent and engaging presence in order to promote CPC and its impact in the community. I outline the objectives as being increasing awareness and education, ensuring that the community is well informed about and understands what CPA is, what CPC is, and then again, how that impacts the community, showcasing projects, et cetera. And then we also want to increase engagement and advocacy, so we want people, sharing and talking about CPC in a really positive light. And also submitting projects. Our audiences are residents and taxpayers, town leaders and stakeholders, so officials, influencers, media, businesses, etc. And then project submitters, both past and potential in the future. This, I'll go through it, but I want to come back to the social platforms piece, but I had updated the group at our last meeting that I had a really awesome conversation with the chamber, and they're really open to helping us to amplify our message and also create content. Again, we'll come back to the discussion on the platforms. In terms of content pillars, so those buckets that we're going to create, overarchingly want it to be really simple, digestible, and when possible, make it fun content, and I broke them down into these buckets. So we want educational content, so that explanatory, did you know by the numbers, content on CPA, CPC, that includes historical information, the why, the how. We'd love to create some videos if we can, but again, focus on education. We want to make sure that we're promoting projects, past, present, and any updates we have. I think it would be great if we educated more on the project submission process, so talk about what it entails, so we have Q&A, we have a meeting about it, the dates, countdown, et cetera, so hopefully we can solicit more and more submissions. And then, general bucket, kind of in the moment, if there are news updates that we want to put out there, positive, share positive media coverage or what have you from partners. Goal to start, I would think, 3 or 4 posts a month. I think I can do a lot of this ahead, bring it forward, we can comment on it and just get it ready to go. We can share it with Cindy, she can get it out there. And then in terms of measurement, we want to look at reach and impressions, so how many people it's getting to, engagement rate, if we're getting comments like shares, et cetera. And then we'll talk about this again in the context of if we have our own channels, but follow the growth if we're building our own following. And then just, these are very draft examples, but the visual aesthetic, like, again, clean, crisp, simple, and engaging. So back to the part around having our own channels. I've gone back and forth on this, and I know that there were reasons and discussion previously about, like, we don't want to have our own CPC channels. But in thinking about this further and talking with Cindy, I think it's beneficial as a kind of an archive and a repository. If we're going to put this effort in collecting all this content, it would be great to have a place that people could come to and see it all and absorb it. And it makes us more, in ways, like, legitimate having that destination. Yes, we have the website, but some of this would be a different complementary set of content that we could drive people to. So I don't know the full, that we talked a little bit about it previously, but I know that there had been reasons, if they were regulatory or archival, that we couldn't do it before. And there's considerations in terms of monitoring and response and whatnot. I think I could handle it, like, engaging and whatnot. I don't think it's going to be a huge impact time-wise for that, but I would love, Mary, if you could refresh on why we couldn't do it before.
So the concern is if we put it out there, it becomes part of our public record for the town, and we have to save it and be able to access it in the future if somebody's looking for it.
Yep.
It just becomes a public record, it becomes part of a municipal retention schedule of things that we have to preserve and be able to reproduce if a public records request comes in.
Okay.
So that's where my concern came from
Okay.
initially. So if we think we can do that, then, yeah. I mean, do I think other departments are doing it? Yes.
Okay.
It was, I don't think we were in a situation before where we could
So in
really
terms of,
manage it.
making sure that we're keeping it, do you mean, obviously it's easy to keep all the content that we're putting out there. Do we have to make sure that we're capturing like all comments and everything?
I think we should
Sure.
try
Okay.
if we can.
Isn't there something
And I just
about-
don't know how.
There's something about responding.
So if there's a public records request, if it's our own thing, as long as we can't debate something, right, it's open meeting law issues.
Yes.
So we can't content can't be serial deliberation, it can't be,
Right.
me going on and saying, I'm gonna vote for this article because I'm reaching the rest of the board outside of public
Right.
meetings. So that's
Right.
the public meeting consideration, the open meeting law consideration of it. The public records portion is really just that anything that we put out, we've got to preserve, as any email we send becomes a part of the public record, and we have to preserve it for public records requests.
Does it have anything to do with downstairs, the clerk's office?
I don't know that they're doing it, right? They're not gonna keep track of our YouTube channel or the town's YouTube channel.
They tell me a format, like I can do it, it's not a big deal.
I would think I would think IT is doing it on the webpage, so.
Okay.
Emily, when you use the word channel,
Yes,
you're not referring to a channel.
I'm talking about,
I just,
yeah,
well, just
Facebook,
explain
I know,
that to me.
Yeah, no, it's again, I reverted to it. It's just, I'm talking about Instagram and Facebook probably, that would be my recommendation.
And having our own account on
Having our
Instagram.
own account, it would be
Okay,
like Harwich
okay.
CPC on Facebook.
I thought you meant
Yes,
that.
Yes, exactly, so you're right.
I did.
And I would suspect that the town has a YouTube Live at this point.
Okay.
I would suspect that, I don't know that there's an Instagram, but I'm sure
And I'm
there's,
happy whoever I need, if I have to.
I'm sure there are Facebook. I would be willing, the Harwich Police and Fire are on Facebook, because I know I'm on there, I know I follow their accounts, so.
Yeah, I think a question that we've always had has been, sort of follow-through and consistency, and that, that's great. I mean, this is excellent. Thank you for doing all this work, and that you're willing to take this on. But it's important that we have a path forward in that someone else is going to be trained to do it down the road. Like, we get a new member, or.
She's not going
That
anywhere.
went from, that went from John to her.
No, I'm just saying that, we've really, before we had nothing on the website. Now we've got this, everything's on the
much, it's
website,
great.
that's great. And now we want to, further expand our, sort of visibility with social media presence, which is great as long as we can continue it. Like, we don't want to start an account and then have it just like fall off the face of the earth because we don't have anybody to maintain or add content, update it or anything, or whatever you guys do on that stuff, I don't know. So. I'm not on any social media, so I don't know.
When Kathy did our first brochure, she cut and pasted, literally cut and pasted pictures and taped it all together. So
And then I
that was
showed it to
literally
John,
Kathy
who
cutting
was
and
gonna have a
pasting.
heart attack. Cut and paste.
Fabulous.
But all that content's
I
great,
know how to
and
do
that's
it
what,
now.
like,
Right.
but that's what I pull for, like, John, what he's put down on the website is
Yeah.
amazing, but it's like, let's take that content, turn it into something different and put it
Right.
up here. And I hear you, I am not planning on going anywhere anytime soon, but I can also, like, the point of putting this together was so that we had a plan, and then I can templatize stuff too. So it's like, if we come up with a template, like I did here, like, do you know, we can do 20 of them and they're ready to go. So I agree with you, it's not, you don't wanna abandon it, but I think, like, creating that repository and at least having that is a good place to start.
So, are you thinking,
Robert, I got him first. Sorry.
As far as records retention, as administrator of a Facebook page, can you actually go in and issue a command that says extract everything from January 1st to December 31st?
You can actually.
See,
I
and
actually
that's-
did this for my personal account like last week,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'm like, can I do that? Like, there's a bunch of pictures on there that like, can I just do it? You can, yes.
And does that, to me, would
And that
be
answers the
record.
question.
But the only other thing with that is people that would delete an entry, then post and then you can delete it. When you dump it, does it show that there was a post and a delete, or does it just show what's finally there? Because that's the one area you really do have to capture, I would think, someone.
So from my perspective, if you were doing the best you could on a regular basis, whether you did it once a month or once every 2 months or once every 6 months,
Okay,
I would tend to think
that's
It's-
sufficient,
you have a plan, you're trying to do what you need to do to preserve it.
right.
I mean,
And that, if you put it on a thumb drive and you give it to the clerk or somebody that will put it in official storage or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good.
And my policy, like, typically when I'm creating like social communities, like, we have guidelines, and if people
yeah,
don't obey them, then you could delete it. But my policy, like, everything stays. Like, I would never delete anything, anybody's comment or anything. So, in stewarding the community, so.
John?
I was just gonna ask a little more about the content. I mean, you referred to taking stuff that's on the webpage and putting it in social media. So just to be a little more specific, would you like take, like a current list of ag projects and post that on Facebook? Are you thinking of doing that sort of thing, or is that a little too detailed?
I
And
think it's more like taking it and laddering, like snackable content, like little pieces of it. So, like, I took the brochure that's up on there, there's a link to a brochure. I took, a couple sentences from it, and that becomes a do you know, like, big piece here that, so it's taking the like, all that deep content and just making it a little, again, pithier for social channels. So you're engaging people through that, like, smaller, digestible pieces of it.
Wouldn't
Robert?
you, in that case, if you want more detail,
Yeah,
just have
you
the
can
URL
direct
to the
people,
website?
exactly.
just have the
Direct
hyperlink.
everybody back to that, but it's like, oh, wow, I just heard about that, that's really interesting, that little nugget or whatever, and then I can go back and learn more about it.
Okay, another question. So suppose you do that and you post in, say, tonight, go home and post about, the still active projects, and you have some pithy little 121 word or character thing, or whatever, with a link to the website. But that's gonna be there somewhere in Instagram, right? So at some point, those links are gonna change, because we're gonna be updating the content on the website. So how is that gonna work? Like, if you put something now, and like next month, Kathy sends me an update, and I put it up, I take down what's there and put up something different, it's probably got a different
I think
link.
we just need to be cognizant of that, and that's why I would probably, like, my intent would be like, let me put it together a month of content ahead of time and come and let's have that conversation so that we're, you know, making sure that we don't have dead links, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think there's ways that we can work through making sure that experience is the right one.
And I think as administrator, can you go back and check for dead links or broken links? And it'll
Yes, we
scan,
can
it'll
update
scan
them.
automatically,
Yes.
and then,
We certainly, yeah, definitely.
So can I ask a question for those of you that are in the Harwich Civic Plus? The way ours works in Yarmouth is that there is a document repository and an image repository that you save under your department, and then that's where I grab my link from. I have to post it there. That's where I grab my link for my image or my document, and then I drop it in to whatever subpage I have on, say, my elections page. I'm assuming this one works the same way, or very similar.
The way all that works changed pretty dramatically when they updated to the new software, and more or less it works that way, but honestly, the newer stuff is more opaque, more convoluted.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's less intuitive to me than the old one was. And I'm still getting used to it.
Okay. I was just curious. Thanks, John.
Kev?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say that, I mean, Emily, I appreciate, again, like, all the work, and that, you know, you're not going anywhere, but remember that we're all here at the vote of our representing committees, which have a tendency to change, people go in and out, and, you know, one year we could be voted off the island, so. If only.
Just have to behave yourself.
Yeah, I know.
It's difficult.
Well, in my opinion, the CPC should think about and talk about setting aside administrative funds in the event that the goals of the social media and web presence don't meet the volunteer hours available. And I'm fine doing what I'm doing for now, but it's not gonna go on forever. And I think all this stuff it's not gonna get less important, it's just gonna get more important. And as long as you have committee members who, you know, have the skills anyway, it's probably not that big a problem, because it's probably not that heavy to lift, but that's not gonna be guaranteed always. Just a comment, not a request for action.
I'm curious, Emily, how are other towns?
I don't know, that's a great, I have not, I looked at the CPA and, their Facebook page.
The
and how they're-
coalition?
Yeah, the coalition and how they're pulling, but I did not look at other towns, I can do that.
Well, when I was thinking about, before I'd actually done anything about the online application, I cast about a little, and I know that back whenever that was, 21, something, Chatham already had an online application. I don't know how they did that. I didn't talk to anyone over there. I sort of have the impression that they had someone on staff doing that, not a volunteer committee member, but I don't know.
Okay, to see if I can, if they have one, but I can do more looking than that.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Not on
Yeah.
that topic, not on that topic. Can I revisit the numbers? So right before we started talking, Kathy was saying that we had lots of money.
I didn't say lots of money.
No, but I just wanted, 30 seconds will explain why there isn't, okay? So I just want to go over this.
Okay.
You're looking at the bottom, the one that says,
Which sheet again?
it's the one that says Harwich Community Preservation Committee account balances analysis.
Okay, got it.
It says ending balance is 630 at the top.
Yep,
Start from the bottom.
Yep.
You're saying our total fund balance is 6.68006,499.
yep,
The encumbrance total of 1,664,497.65 are all of these encumbrances. These are encumbrances that date back
yep, I got
to
it.
the FY '23 meeting, right? Our May '23 meeting. So you take from the 668, the 1,664. You have to take the 1,840, because that's what we voted on last year.
Yeah, I did all that.
And then the 1,864 is what she says we need to take 1.051 out of to deposit into these three buckets. So my point is that this the top four lines are really what we have available to spend from existing revenue, not touching anticipated revenue for next year. That's all we have available. And if you reduce that undesignated fund, like I think we agreed to do it from future revenues, but my point is, if we didn't, we were gonna have some significantly restricted buckets and very little left in undesignated if we don't do that. So while I agree there is a lot of money there, a lot of that money is already spent, right? You've got
What do you mean it's already spent?
the 1.664497 is already spent, the 1,840 is already spent.
Right,
And then you've got to add about 350, a little more, about 375 to each of those three buckets out of the 1.864. And I'm saying, so that historic money, you've only got, what, 37,000? So you're gonna have about 700,000 locked into historic that you're not gonna be able to spend without a historic application.
right.
Which, and
But it
that's
should have
fine,
been in
and
there.
it should have been in there
Right.
originally. I'm just saying, when it significantly changes, for me, it significantly changes the way I did the motions
Well,
and the.
of course,
right?
but,
So that's kind of my other point, that I think we wait and
And
the numbers.
the outcome, just looking at the list, the one that gets hurt are all the recreations.
exactly,
Probably all the other ones will have enough money to cover them.
exactly.
but
Or
there'll
close.
still be some money in recreation, in
There'll be some.
undesignated.
There will be
And
some.
we can always go into,
Then you go into
The next
year
whatever.
for those.
Right.
Yeah, I think
So,
that's
just, if I can respond to what Mary's saying, I have a spreadsheet set up here, because I've done it for the last several years. And I plugged all these numbers in here just now, and I don't see any problem, honestly. I took these numbers here and added 350,000 to each of those, put them in there for 2024, and then took this 1.84 and subtracted 1,051,051, or,
yeah, right,
and put it in for the designated balance, the undesignated
Yeah.
balance, I'm sorry. And then distributed stuff, and I could get all of the recreational stuff except for the tech school out of 24. But then just anticipating what's available from 26 funds, it doesn't seem like there's any problem there at all. And the other ones get distributed one way or another across, mostly from the 24 funds, except for community housing, which has to come out of anticipated.
just unless the 400,000 land grant has to come out of undesignated also and go back into
Correct.
open space, that's another 400,000 that might
Correct.
be in the wrong place.
We don't know where it is, right?
And,
But-
can I just,
Go ahead.
say-
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that the tech school doesn't fall under the recreation category.
So-
Would have to come under open space.
That's a conversation we haven't had yet, right?
That's
And,
true, we have not.
When are we gonna have that conversation?
The last time we got together, I said to Robert that I was giving them more time to get information together. Well, they're not here tonight with any of the information. They've got a reprieve till March 6th.
Okay.
He was here earlier, but I think he was next door at FinCom.
So, unless you want to have a discussion about it, does the board want to have a discussion right now about that particular article?
Our secretary says no.
It's up to the board. It's up to the board to make that decision. Go ahead, John.
My feeling is that if we don't have enough information to make a decision, I think we're spinning our wheels here. If there isn't new information, I'm not sure what the point is.
Kathy?
Do you want me to tell them why it doesn't qualify for recreation funds, or not?
I'm caught between a rock and a hard
Okay,
place
your
with that
decision.
one. I'd rather
Your
have them
your
in the
decision.
room.
Well, we could have had the discussion tonight and without them in the room.
We can have,
I'm just saying.
it's up to the board. Does the board want to hear what we have, what
So
we've
devil's
discovered?
advocate, do they know what we would need to be able to go forward with their?
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
Is that a,
Then I don't care either way.
okay,
If they know already, then it doesn't, then it's,
okay.
if we were gonna provide them with additional information today, then I would. But I'm amenable to whatever the rest of you would like to do, so. I'm ambivalent.
Do you want to hear the information? Marcy?
Yes.
Everybody? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is the information. I spoke to people at the coalition for some clarification. It does not qualify for the use of CPA funding under recreation because it is basically a school campus. The land is the classroom. Everything that they were proposing, the road, the, seating area, everything, it all leads to the school. And CPA funds are not to be used to build schools. They are not, this is not for the community. Okay, so you can't use recreation funds. So the other option is open space funds. The use of CPA funding under open space. The land would need to be acquired or created using CPA funds. Now, this particular parcels they were talking about were purchased with land bank funds, okay? It was purchased, we believe, at least the date we were given was 2000. The CPA was established in 2004, okay? So it was clearly bought with land bank funds, not CPA funds. The only way around that is if the land bank debt was converted to CPA land debt, and we need to have proof of that. Okay, so we need to have records showing that the parcels purchased with land bank funds, the dates of the purchase, the funding of the purchase, who holds the restriction on it, because any properties bought with land bank funds or even CPA funds, open space-wise, have to have some kind of restriction, whether it's a conservation restriction or a cultural restriction or something like that. So we need to know, we need to have, and if they can show us that the land bank debt was carried over into the CPA debt, then we need to have a map showing the land bank protected land parcels, the date of the acquisition of the land bank protected parcels, and a map of the proposed site work overlaid onto the land bank parcels, so that we know that that's exactly what we're gonna be funding.
Read that.
So can I ask a question?
This is from,
Wait.
this is from the Legislative Archives. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so, this is part of the information that we've been given. CPA funds may be spent on the acquisition, creation, and preservation of open space and for the rehabilitation or restoration of any open space that had been acquired or created using CPA funds. It is important to note that a permanent deed restriction is required for all real property interests acquired under CPA. This restriction must be filed as a separate instrument, such as a conservation restriction or an agricultural preservation restriction. And until this step has been completed, the terms of the CPA acquisition have not been technically fulfilled. And we haven't gotten all of this information. So there's just too many holes, I think, for us to really vote on this.
So it's a large amount, it's a large sum that they're looking
Yeah.
for.
And the chairman has done something that he shouldn't have done. He's given them a lot of extra time. So that's on me. But they have the information. They can't get from me. They're looking for a document. I don't know who's got the document. I don't even know if that type of document exists at that time, how it was transferred from one area to the other. So, Mary.
So if I may, in a perfect world scenario, so the last paragraph that Kathy, that you just read, refers to CPA acquisitions. Is the same true of the original land bank acquisition? Or do we know if we would have to do all of those things to convert that from a land bank acquisition to a CPA app?
I think that the land bank required restrictions also, so there was obviously some kind of restriction, there should have been, okay, and there probably is.
Yeah.
The question is what we haven't had answered is, who's holding this restriction?
Yeah.
I don't believe Conservation Commission is holding the restriction, town conservation, right? For this particular,
I don't know, but that is listed as that property is under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're holding
Right.
the conservation restriction.
Right,
If it's a
exactly.
conservation restriction as opposed to an agricultural restriction.
right,
I don't know the answers.
And that's the question.
that's, it's just
Gotcha.
lots of stuff.
So, all that being said, without all of that information that Kathy has indicated that we need, it really doesn't feel like we're preserving open space or creating open space. It feels like we're developing a curriculum for the school. So, and I think that's not something we can spend our money on. If in a perfect world, it all comes together. I love the project, I love the program.
So do I, yeah, exactly.
I think they're great, they're great programs, and I would love to see them be able to expand the curriculum in that way. But, and if we can help because it qualifies as open space, then that's great. But it seems like there are a lot of hurdles to get through to get there, because otherwise it feels like we're paying for them to develop a curriculum. And I just don't think we can spend our money on that unless they can check off all the boxes on showing that that debt was part of the land bank debt that we've been paying over the last 20 years. If that was part of the land bank debt that we've been paying off, then maybe that's the first step in the hurdle. But it seems like there's a lot of information left. And
Now
yes,
it's time to.
and yes, they have a couple of weeks to figure it out.
Kathy?
Yeah, and just speaking to Mr. Chori's, points, he had some very valid points that he brought up as a taxpayer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, any questions? All right,
Well, being Mr. Newby here, that was one of that request never quite, it kind of stuck with me because it didn't seem to fit in any of the areas. So listen to the conversation, and so I'm trying to figure out, okay, where does this go? And one of the things, it sounds like we're trying to take a square peg and stuff it into a round hole.
You have a way with words.
Yeah, and, you know, you can make it fit, you get a big enough hammer, and sooner or later, we'll chip it down and we'll make it fit. But it shouldn't have to work that way. It should go simple for, you know. And I look at this process as being a two-point process of how you should be voting on these. One, you should be just voting on the merit, and then number two, you vote on the dollars. And I think the dollars should be separate from what we have to spend. If we have plenty of money, that shouldn't cloud us on the merits of a proposal. You know, it should all be looked at, that's separate. Then you come back and say, okay, this is what we have to spend, and then this is what it adds up to, and then maybe you gotta pare it down, whatever. But this item here, I have to go along, I have to believe what Kathy's coming up with, and there's obviously a lot more documents than I can imagine, and to make this a clean thing, and maybe the suggestion is if they put it all together and come back at a later time, it'll sail right through, and it'll be no problem at all. But right now, I'm skeptical. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else?
I think it was interesting.
Marcy?
Mary's point when she said that it was like we were creating a curriculum, because as you remember, when he was first presenting it, they're modeling it of the Upper Cape Tech. They have a program, so there must be something there. How did they get it funded? You know, I'm just curious, but I think it's great, but it has to be appropriate, funded appropriately.
Okay. Anything else from anybody else? Well, I guess we pretty much know where that's gonna go. Okay. Anybody want anything on the agenda for our next meeting?
Motions.
Well, I'm at a loss. So if we have the meeting on the 6th, are we gonna meet the following week for our regular scheduled meeting? I'm asking.
Hopefully, if we have a meeting on the 6th, we'll get everything clarified. That'll be the end of that.
So we won't meet on the 13th?
We won't meet the 13th.
Okay.
Well, don't give the
Don't-
meeting,
don't-
don't give the meeting
Don't
spot
give
up
the room
yet.
up.
Yeah, don't give the room up just yet.
Because we might need to meet the second week.
Might need to file an agenda quickly.
Don't give away the room yet.
Things that we had scheduled for the meeting after we voted, we had the grant agreement discussion.
Yep.
We also have, we're supposed to be bringing in the project managers to give us the spring update on open balance projects.
What's the board's pleasure?
Can we put them off a month?
Can that all be put off till April?
Yes.
Yes, it can. When's the date? Do we have a date for the April?
School vacation week, most likely.
It's 10,
April 10th?
April 10th.
Everybody good with that for the moment?
Moment.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second,
To do what?
adjourn.
Go home.
So who's saying it? Kathy and who?
I so moved.
John moved it.
John?
John said it, Kathy seconded it.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Emily, thank you for the work, but please eliminate me from any interviews you do. Thank you.
Don't listen to
This person here, this person right there.
Welcome.